I transitioned from the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II to the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV. And in this video, I will be sharing my personal experience and what I feel about this upgrade. Is it worth it? Stay tuned. Okay, first, I want to state that this video is not sponsored. Sony didn't pay me to speak about this phone or to say anything about the features of these two smartphones I have with me here. Okay, let's jump right into this video. First that I want to talk about is the physical look of the phone. Now, the first thing you notice outrightly when you hold the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II and the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV is the weight. The Sony Xperia 10 Mark II is lighter. It seems a little bit lighter. It feels as if it's body made of plastic as compared to body made of metal frame with plastic behind. So it feels lighter here. The overall material used in building the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV seems to weigh more. Secondly, when you hold a Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV, you have this elegant feel. There's something you feel outrightly. You know you are holding something very, very unique, something very classy. Yes, that's the feel you get when you hold the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV. On the other hand, the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II feels just like a regular. The Sony Xperia 10 Mark II has served me for over 2 years, and you can see it hasn't really sustained too much scratch. The back is still almost new. It's looking almost new, although I used it with a pouch while I was using it for the period of 2 years and plus. The Sony Xperia 10 Mark II is for basic use, I must say. This Sony Xperia 10 Mark II is not for heavy tasking, it's just for basic use. The RAM is very low, it's just 4 gig RAM. The internal storage here is 128 gig. It's just for my basic task. And one of the reasons that I made up my mind to switch to the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV is because I needed more RAM. I needed a phone that could handle more of my task. I get to do a lot of networking, and sometimes when I get to my customer, I might not be with my laptop and I want to get to use my phone to do all the configuration. And apart from that, I actually needed a phone that would give me a better performance. The Sony Xperia 10 Mark II can be sometimes sluggish. My past years, the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II had hung that I had to restart it severally because it couldn't handle a particular task. The Sony Xperia 10 Mark II is for basic use. So if you are transitioning from the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II to the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV, yes, it's really worth it in terms of performance. The Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV handles tasks way more better than the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II. Second thing I want to talk about is the back side of the phone. I want some sort of shadow cast on the cameras. Yes, you can see the cameras at the back side of these two smartphones. The Sony Xperia 10 Mark II does not really feel so elegant. It has this conventional arrangement of camera behind it. And then the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV actually imitates what you have on the Sony Xperia 1 series, and which is very good. I actually love this camera arrangement. I love this camera feel. I love the look. Leaving the camera now, talking about the body, side by side, you can see that there is a very, very sleek look on the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV as compared to the curvy edge on the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II. Both have side-mounted fingerprint sensors, but the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II does not come with dedicated camera shutter button like the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV. This phone comes with rich features. In fact, this phone is a beast. Look at the softwares that Sony equipped the phone with. This is more or less like a vlogging phone. This phone handles multimedia streaming. It handles anything that has to do with camera. It handles it very, very well. When you look at the features on the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV, you won't find those features on the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II. There are no multimedia softwares like the Sony Cinema Pro that you have here. You don't have the Photo Pro app as well that comes with the pre-installed software from DSLR cameras. So in other words, you are holding a DSLR camera in a smartphone. Isn't that interesting? That's something that Sony took their time to actually embed in the smartphone. The Sony Xperia 10 Mark II will suit someone who intends to use a phone for basic use. You don't need much advanced features from the smartphone. You are going to be enjoying the use of the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II. The Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV, on the other hand, can handle multitasking way more better. Then the feedback on the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV is improved as compared to the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II. The feedback on the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV emulates music, multimedia sounds, and videos. When you turn on the feedback system, you get to feel as though the phone is dancing along with any music that you are playing. So it could be that the phone can be playing some sort of beat and give some rhythmic vibrations, which is actually very, very interesting. Now that feature is absent here on the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II. Another noticeable feature that you see when you handle the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV versus the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II is the display. The display on the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV is much richer and sharper. The density of the color saturation and the depth of the color on the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV is way richer compared to the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II. This gives more color precision and accuracy when you take photos and pictures and check media content with the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV. Another noticeable feature which I must say I find very, very interesting on the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV is the integration of the eSIM. Previous flagships have not been coming with that. You just have the regular dual SIM here on the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II. Here on the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV, we have one physical SIM and then one eSIM, which is actually very interesting. That improves security overall, and at the same time it makes it almost impossible for the phone to be stolen. If a phone gets stolen there, you know you can track it down easily because of the embedded eSIM system that comes with the phone. The Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV supports higher Android version. Here we are running Android 14, and the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II is running Android 12. Now this is the peak of the Android version supported or released by Sony for the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II. And here we have Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV with Android version 14. Android version 14 comes with much more richer features focused on performance and power management. On the Sony Xperia 10 Mark II, we have 3500 mAh of battery, while we have 5000 mAh of battery on the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV. This allows the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV to handle tasks longer. The Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV can actually last for up to 2 days. The Sony Xperia 10 Mark II can take you less than 24 hours. Let me know what you think about these two great devices. Leave your comments below. Thanks for watching. Nice day.